So, what is a free trade and why it's so important nowadays in our economy? Let's start saying what is free trade. A free trade is a trade policy that does not restrict imports or exports. It's the main idea of the free market as applied in international trade, that buyers and sellers from different economies may voluntarily trade without a government applying tariffs, quotas, subsidizing, and prohibitions of services and goods. Free trade is the opposite of trade protectionism or an economic isolationism. The inability of nations or companies to create substitute goods in a marketplace allows companies to charge higher consumer prices and increase the gross profit. The importance of a free trade can help nations improve job opportunities in the economic market. Also, companies allowed to maximize a nation's natural economic resources can develop a comparative advantage when producing consumer goods. Comparative advantage usually allows companies to offer a higher employee wages, since a few companies or nations are able to reproduce the specific goods.
Hello, I'm Alejandro Pavlovich and I'm going to talk about why countries trade. Why countries trade? There's not any single country around the world that is self-reliant. When a country has no resources, they have to get a surplus by developing their domestic scarce resources. Nowadays trade is an important part of global economy and the first responsible of the development of the modern world. Goods and services are likely to be imported by several reasons. But, for example, when the countries need a cheaper goods, they want to import them. And or when they are looking for a very quality goods or service, they have to import if they don't have the local resources to develop it. But what happens when there's no a local option, which is the case of Japan, which is the fourth largest consumer of oil around the world, but they don't even produce any single liter of oil, so they have to import all of them. And now I'm going to talk about the advantage we have on free trade. And the first one is exploitation of the comparative advantage of a country. The second one will be the economies of scale, which is about cost and benefits. We get competition and lower prices, which is good for the economy. And we break down the monopolies, the local monopolies, we break them down. And we encourage the trade of technology between countries, and we increase the employment. And here is the next topic, which is why governments restrict trade. And I want to talk about first about tariff. A tariff is a tax imposed by the government focused on some industries or some products and are very focused on them. And the cost added by the taxes affects directly the balance of trade. And here we have the reasons why the government restricts trade. The first one is because of the infant industries. The government has to protect all these infant industries or domestic industries from the international competition. And in theory, these should give time enough to be developed for the domestic industries. The second one is the security. The government must check all the kind of product that enters the country and their impact on the society. Domestic employment. The government has to discourage all the consumption for the international companies to increase the domestic employment. And the aggressive trade practice. Here we have the example of Trump with China, that they are in a trade war. And the last one is environmental concerns. Environmental concerns, it's about all those products that don't adhere to the environmental standards of the country, and it's affecting the environment.
What is WTO? WTO stands for World Trade Organization. The WTO is the only global international organization that deals with trades between nations. At its heart are the WTO agreements. What are the WTO agreements? These agreements are signed and ratified in its parliament between all the nations that participate in the WTO. Some of these agreements are the Marrakesh Agreement, which established the WTO. Another would be the Multilateral Agreement on Trade in Goods, as well as the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Its mission is to help producers produce goods and services, importers and exporters pay less on tariffs. And all this is to help them conduct their businesses. One example would be on the agreement and on the General Agreement on Trades and Tariffs. They would decrease the prices on tariffs so nations could import and export more, because they can only import and export depending on the prices that they're able to pay. All right, now we'll talk about pros and cons for consumers and producers with the consequences of free trade agreement. The pros for consumers, most importantly, would be that consumers have more variety in their options of products. In their general stores or in the full vicinity, there would be more options because the free trade makes products from all around the world arrive in their local communities. Another thing would be the prices would drop because of the competition. One that dominated the market would now have competition, which would make him have to drop pricing to a fair fair price, isn't? It also allows for foreign exchange, and it also, another thing that I personally found a pro for the consumers would be more culture awareness. Since products from all around the world will be arriving in your vicinity, you could see products from Japan, from China, from France, and all those things. Now, the cons for the consumers would be that very thing, which is up to you or to your interpretation. Since more cultures will be coming to your area, it's possible that your traditions would disappear. It's not 100% true, but it has been written on the internet that seems to happen. Another thing would be,
Action.
It can harm the environment. It's another con. Since more products will be arriving in your vicinity, that means more factories and more people who are going to be industrializing your area. So technically pollution and simply the change in the nature around you would change drastically. The pros for the producers. There's many pros. One of them would be increased job outsourcing, which would mean more, since the free trade makes it so people open their borders not only to products but to people as well, employment. That means you can be recruiting people for cheaper prices. An example would be United States, how they hire us, the Mexicans, because we're cheaper labor. Another thing would be foreign direct investment. More countries are going to see a certain product is doing good in your region, so they will probably invest in you so you can keep producing and probably producing more, especially the governments like to invest in your country's like to invest in your business if you're doing good for the country. And that's another thing that's good for consumers would be increased economic growth. Now, for the cons for the consumers would be, since you're gonna go trading in the free trade agreement with the world, that means you're vulnerable to theft of intellectual property. People would be copying your ideas. China would be a huge case where they see other products in the world and make it theirs, but cheaper. And people tend to go for cheaper. Another thing would be, a huge con for the producers would be sometimes it can crowd out domestic industries. And that means that other industries from the world could come into your country, and that would just kick you out. It would drive you out of business. That's when protectionism comes in and tries to protect domestic industries, but it doesn't always work out the best.
Comparative advantage. What is it? For starters, comparative advantage it describes the work gains of a certain individual, firm, or nation in work trade. What does this mean? Well, basically it means that a certain individual, firm, or nation will produce more of a certain good and export less of it. In the case of Mexico, well, Mexico's comparative advantage would be its size its location, and its export-orientated mentality. What this means is that it could do trade simultaneously, either in North America, South America, due to its location. Using its oceans, it could go trans-Pacific or transatlantic, meaning that international trade is a very viable option in Mexico, which makes its comparative advantage way better than many other nations. Now I'm going to talk about the import and export process, starting with the import process. Okay, I'm going to go quickly through some points about the import process that are basic for you to achieve it. First off, setting market objectives. What this means is that you know what you're selling and what you want to achieve. For starters, setting the price for your product. Number two, sourcing products. This means finding from where you're going to get your products, your merchandise, where you're going to get your resources to make that product if you don't have them available to you. Number three, trade regulations. You have to know if there are any trade regulations or restrictions on your product that you intend to import. For instance, if you have to pay any tariffs or special quotas. Number four, making contacts. This is going through a list of suppliers. You have to make a list of suppliers and choose the best one for you. Number five, settling quotation in terms. This is once you have the supplier, you settle on quotation in terms with them before you finance the purchase. What this means is you will have the money available for purchase. You must make sure you have the capital before you start going any further. Number seven, sales contract. This is key. This is key with anybody you want to do business with. You have to be clear on the terms, and the sales contract will help you get everything stipulated so there's no issues. Number eight, preparing payments and insurance. Well, as in number six, you have to have the money, but once you have the money, what do you do with it, right? So you prepare payments and insurance. In case anything goes bad, you have the insurance to cover it, you're all set. Number nine, acquiring the goods. Well, this is, once you have the payments, you acquire the goods from your provider, your supplier. And number 10, customs clearance. As I mentioned back here, you have to make sure there aren't any trade regulations, and if there aren't, you get everything sorted out. Until this point, you get clearance from customs, which means you won't have any issues going to pick up your merchandise, and that would be imports. Now, export, the export process. The first thing would be market research and setting objectives of distribution. What this means is you know what your target market is, you know who you're selling to, and next you have to find a distribution path that best suits you and is more economic, which would be the best thing. Trade regulations. You have to know if the product you're exporting has any trade regulations on it, any restrictions to the country that you intend to import it to. Making contacts. Making contacts, well, as the same thing goes in exports as in imports. You have to make contacts to know who you're selling to. In this case, instead of your provider, you're looking for a buyer. Number 4, quotation and terms. Likewise, you have to know if there are any quotations or quotas that you have to pay, any terms and restrictions that there may be on your product, if you're going to pay any fees for holding the product, the distribution, all of that stuff. Number 5, a sales contract. Well, this just makes everything clear, right? With the quotas and anything that may apply any fees, you just have it stipulated so you're good to go. Number 6, contract execution. As I stated, you're good to go, you're set, now you execute what's in the contract, you get what you're selling, your merchandise, you get it to the people you have to. Make sure customs clearance. You have to be with all your paperwork in order so that the product that you intend to export clears customs. Last thing, the most important, getting paid. Once you get paid, you're all set and you've officially exported a product.